Hey, folks, I'm live. This is Scotty Roberts. Welcome to my program. This is the Intrepid radio program live right here on the Odyssey Radio Network. That's ODYSY1.com. Come on over and see all the goodness that's Odyssey Radio. And you can also find archives over there of this show and links to different places where you can find this in its audio format. At the same time, come on over if you're not here already to my YouTube channel, and that's youtube.com/Mr. Scotty Roberts. And while you're there, you can join the chat room, which is going on right now. I see some guys over there now I already know. Roger Rabbit's over there, Doug Stack, and who else we got? We got anybody else in there yet? Starting to line up. We got more than them in there. So come on over, join the chat room, and keep in mind that the chat room is there to talk about whatever you want to talk about. You can talk about this show. You can talk about anything else that's going on in there. Also, if you're over there and you're watching the live video, you can just be a voyeur. You can be over there and watch the chat, and you don't have to participate in it at all. But you are welcome to come in, join the chat, and join the conversation. Yeah, we're live, Doug. Master Finn, good to see you. What's that say? Oh, Dougius Maximus saying hello. This is the beauty about going live and seeing the live chat room is being able to see all you and communicate with you one-on-one. So you won't see me typing much in the chat room tonight. You're going to just hear me say it and talk about it. And so welcome to the program, everybody. Everybody who's listening audibly over on Odyssey Radio and everybody who is here now. And by the way, this probably isn't broadcasting on Odyssey tonight. It's just broadcasting here on the live YouTube stream. And I want to welcome you all here. And so it's good to see you. And now, first thing, let's get some business out of the way. If you would like to become a member of the Intrepid radio program, of this live chat room, you can go over. I'm sorry, this live chat room, the YouTube stream. You can hit the little join button that should be in the window down below this video stream, and you'll see three different ways when you hit join that you can join and become a member of the Intrepid radio program. And they're $2, $5, and $15 respectively per month. And you'll see the perks that you can get. And those of you who are members, because of the weird traveling and all the things that have gone on in the last few weeks, you haven't seen a lot of the extra perks. Those are going to be coming at you now again in full force. So stand by for those. As many of you know, I had COVID for a couple of weeks, and I'll just worth repeating. I wasn't on my deathbed or anything like that. I had what felt tantamount to a huge sinus headache, banging headache, sinus stuff. I lost my sense of taste, not in women, thank Lily. For those of you women who are watching and wondered, hey, Carly Sagan, speaking of women, I did not lose my taste in women. I lost my taste of food, my sense of smell, and that lasted for about 10, 11 days, something like that. And I never had a fever, never had any breathing difficulties or anything like that. So I've heard that COVID hits a lot of people in different ways. So I had COVID in there. I just felt like I'd been hit by a truck for about 10 days, and then it subsided gradually. And so now we're back, and that was, I'm supposedly not contagious, nor can I get it for at least 120 days, maybe. Some say 2 years. We're not sure. So for now, I'm okay. And I am I've relocated in the last couple of weeks to Louisiana temporarily, where I'll be working down here. So my environs have all changed. I don't have my fancy background up with all my swords and things like that, and my statues and stuff like that. So we are embedded in a very secret bunker somewhere in Louisiana, where I have to say, I have had crawdads in the past, but for the Super Bowl last night, one of our work crews, one of the Mexican work crews that works for our company, they threw a big crawdad feast. I don't know if that's what you actually call them. The dog, by the way, belongs here, so you may hear him voice his opinion every now and then. Right now, last night we had a crawdad feast, and they bought 60 pounds of crawdads, or crayfish, if you will. And they roast them so they're all red, and you just snap them in half and you suck the tail out, the meat. And if you're really into this, you can suck the upper portion and get all the meat and brains and jellified whatever out of the head. I just threw the head away. Not into the sucking head. I like sucking the tail, however, as they call it affectionately. So, crawfish, says Doug Stack. And again, for those of you who may have missed it, Doug Stack came out here on Friday or Saturday. I can't remember which day. Took my son Sam and I out for some catfish, and we had a good time with Doug. And so get it up and going soon. I'm not sure what everybody's referring to here. I've been reading the chat room, but we'll refer to that time and time again here. And so I want to also direct you to my website, ScottAlanRoberts.com. Scott with 2 T's, AlanRoberts.com. You can see the work that I do. I'm an illustrator, I'm a designer, and all of those things. You can go over there, take a look at my work, and see what I might be able to do for you, and with some work that we might be able to do together. And you can also go over to my Etsy page. I'm getting all this stuff out of the way right now and up front. My Etsy page, etsy.com/shop/son of a patriot. You're going to go see all the t-shirts and hoodies and mugs and all the different paraphernalia that we make, all the products that is affectionately known as our merch. And it promotes the show. At the same time, every one of the topics that we've covered over the last year and a half on this show, there's a shirt designed for it somewhere in the mix. So you can go take a look. So Carly, thank you, Carly. She loves my Etsy page. I appreciate that. And thank you, Master Finn, for putting those links up in the chat room. I appreciate that. And let's see, what else do we have in the chat room? There it is, just a corrected link. So Rock and Rhonda, good to see you tonight. Nice to have you here in the chat room. That's, again, the beauty of going live, is being able to talk to you all a little bit of interactivity. But there is something, I got a couple of topics lined up here. And I said I was going to be talking tonight about, are you experiencing being hooked by emotional hijacking? We're going to talk about what that is. Do you know what emotional hijacking is? Well, we're going to talk about that. Now, this show, like I say, we do these great shows on history, shows on religious history, on Gnosticism, on metaphysics, on the paranormal, things like that. But we also have our episodes we do that deal with psychological matters, psychology. And that's kind of where this one is going to fall a little bit. And it's mostly because I've experienced some people in my life recently that I look at it and I say, I think it might be good for all of us to know and have a little refresher course on what emotional hijacking is. What is ignorant emotions? Emotional ignorance versus emotional intelligence. And there are some of those things that we need to look at, because those are things that are going to really determine how we deal with things and people and things like that in our lives. So we're going to get into that tonight. But before I do, who we got? Sarah Nichols, good to see you. Nice to have you here tonight. And glad that you made it out to the chat room. And before we go too much further, though, I wanted to look at a couple of things. And one was an archaeological thing that I wanted to talk about. This to me is kind of exciting stuff. As you know, I'm an historian, not a credentialed historian. Oh my God, no. I've had people point that out to me in the books I write, and I've claimed to be a historian. Well, they say, well, you're not a historian. I don't see what institution of higher learning did you get the letters behind your name to become an historian. I said, well, let's take a look at what the definition of an historian is. Someone who studies and researches history. Boom, I'm an historian. Now, I may not be a credentialed one. I'm not a professor of history anywhere. I don't teach history anywhere except here on the radio show. But I have those kinds of challenges come up all the time, and I think they're ridiculous. Now, I understand the need for credentials. I do understand also the need for there to be people who, that there's some gauge and some measure by which we look at history or anything that's out there. I'm not an archaeologist. That doesn't mean I haven't assisted archaeologists. Doesn't mean I don't know anything about archaeology. I'm an historian. It doesn't mean I don't know shit about history, because I do. I've studied it my whole life. And so, but I wanted to talk to you about this because I thought it was very interesting. You know how I'm I'm very much into biblical archaeology. And sometimes biblical archaeology, why does it exist? We talked about this once before. Biblical archaeology exists for the purpose of taking topics that are in biblical text and surrounding biblical text and seeing if there is historical efficacy to them, seeing if there's archaeology to back them up. And so it's like King David. They said he didn't think he ever really existed. That's some of the criticism out there that's been out there for centuries, until they start finding artifacts that mention David's administration in Israel, the seal of the house of David, things like that that pop up. Somebody said, well, that's only a couple of little seals you found. Well, you know what? After about 3,000 years, you find a seal, like a ring seal. It'd be something like this, like a signet ring to which they pressed it into wax or clay. That this is, you find a seal that mentions the house of David, or that was associated with the administrating of the house of David, or the administration of David, you're going to see something that really gives you an insight and a light on history. And so I saw this little article today, and it's from Biblical Archaeology Review. And it's talking about, of all things, olives. And there's early signs that olives were produced to be eaten from about 6,600 years ago. And they were found off the coast of Haifa in Israel. Now, at the Hishule Carmel excavation site that's under the Mediterranean Sea, researchers have found two oval stone structures and containing thousands of well-preserved olive pits. Now, you might think, big deal, olive pits. I don't even like olives. I don't eat them. I might have them in a martini every now and then, but I don't really eat them. But there's an importance to this, and I'm going to tell you what that is. The pits were mostly whole. They weren't crushed, as the pits that were found in the olive oil production site of Kfar Samir from 7,000 years ago. And so the researchers believe the olives at Hishule Carmel were picked for eating. Additionally, the site would have been at the ancient coastline, too close to the sea for preserving olives without mold. And so this discovery is the earliest evidence of olive production to eat the fruit by about 4,000 years. Because we always knew olive oil was used for many different things. It's kind of like coconut oil. You know, I went down to visit my grandfather in Honduras several years ago. And back in the late 70s, he bought a big piece of a little tiny island about 30 miles off the north coast of Honduras, which would be about, I don't know how many miles, but south of Cuba. And so in the Caribbean. And when he was down there, he owned this land. And I'm trying to remember exactly the connection I was going to make to the olives. Oh, olive oil down there, coconut oil. Coconut was in everything. You could find bananas everywhere. You could find coconuts everywhere. So coconut was used for food product. It was used for oils. You could put coconut oil on your skin if you're going to go out in the sun so you wouldn't burn. Coconut oil for all different kinds of uses. Same thing with olive oil in the ancient past. Olives were used for the oil. But the importance of this find is that they weren't crushed, like they've been crushed and smashed to extract the oil. They were whole, these pits. And that's because they were used as a food item. Now, olives are mentioned many times in the Bible, though never as a fruit that was eaten. Olive oil was important as food, for light, as an ointment, for soap. And a man who had a large amount of olive oil was considered very prosperous. And the loss of the olive crop for disobedience to God was a serious threat. That was in Deuteronomy 28, verse 40. And the return of the dove with the olive branch was a symbol that was supposed to tell Noah that there was land to return to after the great flood in Genesis. And these are biblical texts we pull these from. And so the olives at Hishule Carmel could have come from wild trees at Mount Carmel, or even have been cultivated in ancient groves, though the ancient groves of olive trees haven't yet been found. Once harvested, the picking of olives the pickling of olives in the utensils discovered could have taken place after the fruit was washed repeatedly in seawater in order to reduce the bitterness, and then soaked in seawater, and possibly with the addition of sea salt. And there was Professor Ayala Fishman. It's a good thing he lives on the coast. The discovery and research into DFKSDJ was published in the Journal of Scientific Reports by researchers from the University of Haifa. And this is where we find this information. Dr. Galili explained, we didn't find any residential buildings at the Hishul Carmel site or at Kafar Samir, but we found pits, round utensils, stone grinding basins, sieves made of twigs, and now the olive production facilities. Now, these sites might have served as these ancient industrial zones for the settlements along the Carmel coast in the Chalcolithic period, beginning to produce olive oil around 7,000 years ago, and olives for eating around 6,600 years ago. Now, why is that important to us? It's not really not important to our daily life, but it is important to understanding the history of the people, the beginnings of the anthropological studies of the people that resided there. So up to 6,600 years ago, what are you looking at? About 4,000 BCE to 5,000 BCE. They're finding that pits were gathered and put in big bins to store them for food. And so that's a very interesting discovery. So there you go. That was just a little bit of an archaeological study that gives you a little bit of history about Israel and why. And of course, you can use that to back up all the use of oil from the olive fruit all throughout the Bible. So there you go. And by the way, hanging behind me here, it's my jacket. I just happened to see it in my camera. This is the jacket my 11-year-old son made me buy. Anecdotally, I want you to see something. You see right there? It's got the Wrangler logo, but I don't know if you can see that, but it's upside down. Oh, there it is. Pointing to the wrong thing. It's sewn on upside down. So my 11-year-old son, who collects trading cards and stuff, said, Dad, you got to buy that just because the label's on it upside down. It might be worth something someday. So I have a Wrangler jacket. That's why that's hanging in the picture. So there you go. Hey, Delaney, good to have you here. Well, let's see who else we got. We got Field Guy. Good to see you in here. Michelle Kenham-Free. McFree. Good to have you here. And we got, of course, all our regulars I've already mentioned up above. Good to have everybody here. Teresa. Good to see you. And Iowa X, good to see you. Green olives and beer. It's good. Isn't that a Dr. Seuss book? Oh, I do not like green olives and beer. I do not like them. Do not bring them here. I do not like them with a ham. I do not like them with an egg. I do not like them with a goat. I do not like them when I beg. I do not like green olives and beer. Anyway, blah, 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 blah. Make up your own song. So good to have you here, Iowa X. And I think I saw Carly. I saw Rock and Rhonda. Tara Rex. I walked to Hezekiah's tunnel in 2018, Tara says. It was the greatest experience of my life. Tara, I would love, that's a place I have not gone. I have not been to Israel, and I would love to go there. When we were talking about on this show, Tara, if you're still here, you may or may not have heard these episodes we did several months back, talking about the temple in Jerusalem and the pros and cons of, is where the Mosque of Omar sits in Jerusalem today, is that actually the ancient site of the temple? Was that the temple compound? Some have argued the fact that that whole compound is actually what you're seeing, the remains of the Roman Antonia fortress. So they're saying if you had a Roman station, they're going to need much more than the ruins of that little castle-like looking structure that used to stand to the, what would it be? The east, north of the temple compound. And of course, the Wailing Wall on the west, which is there today, which they say is the remnants of the foundation of Herod's temple. But we were talking about that. We showed some pictures of Hezekiah's tunnel. I mean, what an amazing feat when you think about that. Now, Tara, if you're still here in the chat room, did you actually get to, you say you were in the tunnel. Did you walk the whole course of the tunnel? Because I know, yeah, you say you believe the first century temple was the city of David. Yeah. Now I don't know what you're saying there exactly. I know when we were talking about it, we were saying the city of David, which is Mount Ophel, there Ophal, the old city of of Jerusalem, and that to the north of that would be the citadel of David, and then eventually the palace of David, and then the structure of the Temple of Solomon that he built. Now, are you referring to that as possibly being the site of the temple was within the walls of the city of David or outside the wall of the city of David up on the top of the mountain? That's where I think, and we looked at both sides of that issue. Was the temple there? Was the temple down at the pool of Gilboa? Things like that. There are all these questions about that. And so I think it was probably on the site where the Mosque of Omar sits today. That's to the north of the city of David. I mean, right outside the walls of the city of David. So, but I got to go there and see it. There's so many places I'd like to see in Israel, in Jerusalem. So, Tara, if you got to walk that whole course of Hezekiah's tunnel, I envy you. That is quite the place, quite the historical site. So one of these days I'll get there. So, but all that to say, it's important to understand history. And I think it's important to understand Judeo-Christian history, especially if you grew up that way, like I did. Knowing about all these things, they have a great appeal. It's like for me being Scottish and Welsh, mostly Welsh, in my background. Now I find out recently a lot of Scandinavian too. Go figure. Go figure. Odin. And Odin had to get his seed in there somewhere. And so I'm drawn to going to Wales, to going to Scotland, going to Ireland. I like to see things in Great Britain. So I've got a lot of British in me as well. But now that I've got Scandinavian, I don't know. I've been ambivalent to visiting Norway, Sweden, places like that. Now maybe I should. I don't know. So there's that. Well, anyway, there's our olive talk. And I wanted to throw that in tonight because I thought it was an interesting little topic to throw in at the beginning. And there's something else I wanted to take a look at. We've talked about this a lot. This idea of, and this is before we get into the emotional stuff, but this is really kind of a bit of a precursor to this. And it's understanding fear, the things that make us afraid and make us not want to proceed because of fear. I have fears about stuff. Look at people right now that are still afraid to go outside without a mask, afraid to look at all the fear that's been built in our nation over the last year regarding COVID. Now, I'm not commenting on whether that's good or bad. It's a fear. I had a fear early on because I had that, as I've mentioned before, that wonderful trifecta of susceptibility to COVID. And so, in doing that, or in having those fears, There are patterns of fear that are patterns that fuel our fear of failure, our fear of dropping the ball, our fear of not being able to move forward or move ahead. And I think we've been in kind of a lockdown of the mind and of the spirit in the recent year. And the need to achieve is something that is ingrained in our DNA, to get ahead, to achieve, to make things work for us. That's part of who we are. It's part of the way we are hardwired. Now, spend a few minutes talking to someone, and their deepest ambitions are going to come to light. You notice that? You talk to somebody, even if you don't know them, it invariably in the first 5 statements of conversation, it can lead to talking about, well, what do you do? Well, here's what I do. Hey, I'm really proud of this thing I do. That's where we go with it. And it might be pursuing advancement in a job, earning a degree, finding a life partner, starting a business. And um, I've had the privilege of hearing a lot of people talk about these things when I was in ministry, when I was in business and doing things. You hear a lot of this stuff. Unfortunately, as probably many of us have, I've witnessed countless dreams that have fallen to absolute ashes, not because of failed attempts, but because of the failure to attempt. All right, see the difference? Not the failure of attempting and having failed, but the failure to even step out and make the attempt. And this is why, again, for the 300th time, I will mention my mantra in life, that Mark Twain quote, 20 years from now, you'll regret more the things you didn't do than the things you did do. So cast off from the safe harbor, set your sails to the trade winds, explore, dream, discover. This is who we are. So when we fail to do that, that's where you can see innumerable amounts of dreams that have gone to ashes. Now, there's an anxiety that keeps us anchored and prevents us from moving forward toward our goals. Our fear of failure keeps us frozen in place as the train of life passes us by. I've mentioned it before a million times. John Lennon once said, life is that thing that passes you by while you're waiting for it to happen. How much of that do you suppose is driven by fear? That we don't step out, we don't look to even try to attempt to succeed at something. Our mind generates these inaccurate thoughts known as cognitive distortions, and those fuel our fear of failure. Our cognitive distortions fuel our fear of failure. By correcting these thoughts, we can reduce the anxiety and get back on track to reach our goals. And here are, I've got 5 different things here I want to cover. I know this is not our main topic. I try to squeeze all this stuff in, so enjoy it. There's 5 cognitive distortions that we can overcome. 1, failure is personal. That's a cognitive disorder. Did you know that? Failure is personal. We take failure personally. We forget that it's a universal human trait, a universal human experience. Failure. Everybody expresses or experiences failure. It happens to every single one of us. We compare ourselves to successful people and we forget that they also have had experienced many letdowns on their journey to where they're trying to get, or maybe have succeeded in getting. As an example, think of Michael Jordan, basketball player. He said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost about 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed. So you have to consider Thomas Edison too, who I've got my issues with Thomas Edison. I think he did a big slapdown on Nikolai Tesla, but we won't go there for tonight's show. But think of him. He was the driving force behind innovations such as the light bulb. Now, that driving force might have been buying ideas out from other people and shutting them down and claiming them for his own. But motion picture cameras, same thing. He said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that didn't work. And that's so. And so if legends like Jordan, Edison, legends in our history, have experienced these failures, then how could you or I be exempt from the universal experience? The key is to not take failure personally, but recognize it as a valuable learning experience that we all go through. My son and I have been talking about this all week. We learn from our failures. We learn from the things that set us back. Number two, the cost of failure is great. We magnify our fear of failure by jumping to the conclusion that there's going to be a great fallout if we fail. Everybody's going to hate me. My name will be mud. As a result, we avoid applying for jobs, for the promotions, the school of our interest, or even asking somebody out for a cup of coffee because you're attracted to them. Sometimes we just don't do it because we're the fear of failure. We jump to conclusions without questioning the validity of those conclusions. How much do you stand to lose if you're rejected for the job promotion? How about the school application or the date? Now, I conceptualize opportunity as being offered a key that might unlock a door. Your life might improve by walking through it. And anytime you take a chance, you're simply grabbing a key to unlock a door. And what's the worst that can happen if the key fails to work? You're stuck in the same reality holding a seemingly worthless key. So remember that not taking any action toward your goal is the equivalent of declining the key. Oh, no. I don't need to. I'm not even going to try to put that key in that door. And so by falling for the fear of failure, we're just guaranteeing the outcome of failure because we've never actually started. And so there's 0% chance of the door opening if you refuse to take the key and try it. So why not grab a key and give yourself a chance? It's like saying, I'll never win the lottery. Well, not if you don't buy a ticket. It's that kind of thing, kind of. Number three, there's no benefit to failure. This is one of those cognitive disorders we have about it. No benefit to failure. Now, we have this tendency to fixate on negative aspects of failure and filter out its potential benefits. We avoid pursuing our goals. Because why? We dread the disappointment, the shame that might result from failing. But we don't forget that failure is a valuable life experience because it provides us with a golden opportunity to learn and to grow from. To dangle my preposition. I would even argue that we, Audrey, don't you get all hot and bothered now about my dangling prepositions. I would even argue that we grow more from our failures than our successes. Did you get that? Do you think you grow more from your failures or your successes? We can grow through our successes, certainly. But we grow when we fail because we go back to the drawing board and try it again. We work toward doing something better. So let's go on. Let's look at more of this. How about, where did I just put this? Here we go. Somewhere here, I just lost my spot in my own notes. So there's no benefit to failure. That's what we tell ourselves. And number four, if I fail, then I am a failure. That's the other cognitive dissonance that we put to this. This is the other thing that we tell ourselves are reasons why we have these cognitive distortions of what is so. If I fail, I'm a failure. Now, failure is, it's emotionally painful. Yeah, it grates us because we interpret it as a personal indictment. Slap myself, kick myself in the ass because I didn't get the thing done that I said I was going to do, or that I was putting my hand to. And when we fail, we experience shame. It's a reduction in self worth. And failure doesn't have any reflection on your self worth. It might be an indication that you have room for personal growth and need to go back to the drawing board to hone your skills. It's a learning experience, a stepping stone. And you may have even failed because you were simply unlucky. For example, you may have been a strong applicant for a job opening, but you were competing against hundreds of other strong applicants. Did you fail at getting that job because you're a failure? No. So your self-worth, some of this is so rudimentary, but I think it's worth reminding ourselves. So your self-worth isn't determined by your level of achievement. No amount of success makes you more worthy or less worthy. No amount of failure makes you less worthy. Your self-worth is this essential, undeniable part of your humanity. You're worthy because you're human. Number 5, the last one of these. I have nothing to lose by staying put. That's another cognitive distortion to failure. I don't have anything to lose if I just sit still. Well, we avoid taking action because we fixate exclusively on what might go wrong. What have I said? When I've done tarot readings, we get that card. Is it the 9? It's the 9 of Swords, where you see the person sitting up in bed in the dark, and the dog is snarling at the foot of their bed, and there's 9 swords hanging over their head. And the idea with this card was always the anxieties that we have over a perceived failure of something are usually much greater than the thing itself when it happens. And so we create in ourselves our own system of failure by the anxieties that we have about it. And we avoid taking action because we fixate exclusively on what's going to go wrong. You know, people like that. It's all they do. They focus on what could possibly go wrong. Now, that doesn't mean we don't take precautions. We watch, we prepare, and all of that. It means that we don't not move, to use a double negative, we don't not move because of fear of what might go wrong. And we fail to consider that there are two sides to each coin. Keeping the status quo can come at a great cost. So if you don't move at all, that could cost you a lot. As an example, imagine that you're working for a company that's hemorrhaging money. You're hearing whispers that layoffs are coming, or imminent. And you may be afraid of your job security, but decide not to explore your options for fear that nobody's going to hire you. Hence, you put your head down and hope for the best. And can you see how staying put in such a scenario can come at a great cost, a possible great cost? Not a perfect illustration, but you get it. And you're putting all your eggs into a brittle basket by hoping that your company turns it around or that you're going to be spared during the layoffs. Why not just respond to the warning signs by taking action? You might update your resume, explore job openings, yada, yada, yada. You might even talk to a recruiter. So you relinquish your agency by following the fear of failure to take over. Now, I find this is more anxiety provoking than the fear of failure itself. I'd rather take matters into my own hands and fail on an endeavor than to allow others to dictate my fate and tell me that I'm going to fail. At least I'm going to learn something along the way in the process of failing. So remember, you don't live in a bubble. The cost of staying put doesn't only affect you, it also affects those around you. By failing for the fear of failure, you're depriving your loved ones of the benefits that come from pursuing your fullest potential. Now, if you achieve something great, more power to you. But if you fail simply because you don't try something, you're letting those cognitive disorders take over. All right? That's all on that. Now we should really kind of hit the topic of the night because we've only got 21 minutes left of this. Well, 20 minutes left of the show before we're out of here. And this is without even ad time or bump music or breaks or anything like that. So before I go forward, though, let me just see some of the things that you guys are saying over here in the chat room. Let's see if I can actually scroll in the chat room. There we go. For each of my failures, I moved forward in betterment of my life, said Marie Keithley. Outstanding, spot on. Same here. When I have a failure, I don't usually sit and wallow in the failure, although sometimes they're stinging, and we might be reminded of them quite often. Doesn't mean we sit in them and stew. Um, let's see what else we got. I was doing just fine. Now I want a coffee, said Teresa. Go make yourself a cup of coffee. You've turned into a zombie. Uh, let's see. Let's see. I'm just scrolling through to see if anything's got any kind of great a little bit of wisdom throughout this that we can. Doug Stack says Michelle is more beautifuler. I would agree with that. So no pain in life, no gain, says Teresa. You got to go through some stuff. I would say shit. You're saying stuff. I get that. Before you can understand how to value yourself. I get that, Teresa. Damn spot on. And Doug says, Teresa, I've learned the hard way, and I've started turning that corner. That's good, Doug. Sometimes you just got to step out. You got to make it happen. So, and sometimes we have roadblocks. I get that. There are natural roadblocks, but we have to find ways around those. Find ways around the obstacle, underneath the obstacle, over the obstacle. Run a mile in each direction to get around the far ends of the obstacle. So there you go. Let's see. Just seeing what anybody else had to say here. Field Guy says, I only ate it once so far, but yeah, I need to get healthy. My body's breaking down. Well, that's a little off the topic for what I'm saying, Field Guy, but you're right. How do you find success in getting your body to where you want it to be? Same thing I would be. It's by not determining that I'm going to fail if I try, or getting over the hurdle of saying I got to put a lot of work into it. So there you go. So now I want to talk about. There's something that comes out of all of this, and we talked about the fears of getting ahead. And one of the things that I have found, especially recently, in some people that I know, it's that fear that comes from emotional ignorance. It's that fear of lacking emotional intelligence. And it's this whole thing of how to handle emotional blackmail, how to handle things where our emotions, either we emotionally blackmail ourselves, we hijack our successes by ourselves, or there's somebody out there doing it and we allow them to do it to us. And so I want to look first at emotional ignorance. Emotional intelligence is often mistakenly thought of as gut instinct, but emotional intelligence may actually be a skill you can learn, not just a gut thing that you have. Emotional intelligence, or EI, first became a hot household phrase in 1995. And it was thanks to a book on the topic by Daniel Goleman, PhD. But since then, it's been woefully misinterpreted, this idea of emotional intelligence. Think for a minute, if you've heard that phrase before, what that means to you. Kathleen Dowse, PhD, a psychologist at Southern Illinois University in Edwardsville, noticed that experts, books, and workshops often refer to emotional intelligence as a gut instinct or an innate sense about what others are feeling. But the original EI researchers, Jack Mayer and Peter Salevi, they state that EI comprises 4 cognitive abilities. When we talked about cognitive distortions that we put into fear, here are 4 cognitive abilities that give you emotional intelligence: identifying, using, understanding, and managing emotions. 4 cognitive abilities. I'm going to repeat those: identifying, using, understanding, and managing our emotions. Now, to see whether emotional intelligence is intuitive or learnable, the question was asked of 102 students to take a Meyer and Salevi's EI survey and to take this complete computer test in which they had to define a word shown on a screen. And all the students in the study presented at a meeting of the American Psychological Association were asked whether they had used intuition, gut instinct, to determine their answers. And the more subjects reporting using their intuition, the worse they performed on emotional intelligence tests. Emotional intelligence is inversely related with use of intuition. If you're skilled at identifying emotion, you don't need to go with your gut. That's the first thing to know about emotional intelligence. Now, I want to get into this whole thing where emotional intelligence will make some sense. What's emotional hijacking? What's being hijacked by your emotions or being um, blackmailed with your emotions? Yeah, how do you recognize that? How do you deal with that? Now, ask yourself if you think you've ever been emotionally hijacked or if you've ever allowed yourself to be blackmailed emotionally. Here's what I'm getting at. Have you ever felt so overwhelmed by a situation that your normal reasoning and your normal reasoning processes are bypassed and you react in some kind of irrational way? If so, if so, you might be the victim of emotional hijacking. It's like, here's your sign, emotional hijacked. Emotional hijacking is a state where our emotions interfere with the functioning of our brains to the extent where it can result in reactions such as aggression or irrational fear and anxiety. And I want to take a look at what emotional hijacking is, how to recognize it, and what you can do to overcome it. I'm going to refer to a couple of psychologists. There's psychologist David Goleman. He introduced the concept of emotional hijacking in 1995. He wrote, his book was called Emotional Intelligence, what we just referred to, and why it can matter more than IQ. And he's referring to the amygdala hijack. Goleman recognized that this part of our brain is vitally important, not virtually, vitally important. And this is because the amygdala serves as our emotional processor. It's where we throw all our emotions and chop them up into little pieces and process them. However, in some circumstances, it can take over. In fact, it's going to dominate at times the parts of our brain that help us actually be rational about things. How do you think rationally about something rather than emotionally? An amygdala hijack causes the cortex to shut down. It makes it incredibly difficult to think clearly. Not only that, but it inhibits our ability to make rational decisions. And these events then result in the release of adrenaline. Extra adrenaline leads to an increase in heart rate, blood pressure, rapid breathing. So these are all the things that happen when we become, in a sense, emotionally distressed over an emotional issue, being hijacked by the irrational side of us, the non-thinking, non-critical thinking part of who we are. So how the amygdala, uh, uh, I'm sorry, amygdala, it's all these consonants together, MYGD in the middle, amygdala, is involved in emotional hijacking is like this. It's part of our brain which regulates that whole flight or fight response to things in our lives. So it is, in fact, there to protect us from danger. It enables us to react quickly to potential threats that are out there. Goleman suggests that in the modern world, the amygdala can serve to hijack our brains. This is when we're faced with a situation that we find stressful or scary. We don't know how to deal with them. the amygdala prepares our body to react as if the situation presented is a real danger to our lives. And although the majority of cases, there's no real danger at all, other than the mental power we give it. So, how can we recognize these emotional hijacks? An emotional hijack can lead a person to react aggressively or result in a panic attack for others. It has this significant consequence on both our well being and our relationships with other people around us. And this is why it's important to recognize if emotional hijacking is affecting you. Can you think of any situations where you felt an immediate, overwhelming, somewhat unconscious response to something that, when reflecting on it later, seems highly irrational for us? I can't believe I did that. I don't normally act that way, we say. And so if the answer is yes, then it's likely that you've experienced an emotional hijack. And here's how to deal with them is realizing that it's important to distinguish the difference between being emotional and experiencing emotional hijacking. And there's nothing wrong, by the way, folks, with feeling emotional. Absolutely nothing wrong. We don't have to live like Spock. We don't have to be logical all the time and only thinking in our heads all the time. But there's nothing wrong with feeling those emotions deeply, reacting to them. However, when it's our emotional processor that's taking over and we lose all rational thinking, at this point, we need to think about taking steps to control and prevent it. And so being aware of emotional hijacking and how the amygdala works in the brain is the first step in taking control of emotional hijacks. Now, emotional hijacking can come because we fear something that's coming at us. It can happen because somebody else out there is laying the trap, so to speak, the emotional trap. It could be because our reaction to the emotional thing out there is driving us into this fight or flight. I got to fight this or I got to run from it. And we can recognize that some of our reactions to high stress events are absolutely irrational. They're unnecessary. And studies into emotional hijacking have found that two key activities can assist with avoiding emotional hijacking. There's two activities that can help us stop it. Know what those are? How do you stop emotional hijacking? Number one, recognize your triggers. Number two, increase your emotional intelligence. It's not just gut, as we talked about a little earlier. You can increase that and make your emotional intelligence rise. So you got to know your triggers. That's number one. Recognize what triggers an emotional hijack. Recognizing that is an important step to dealing with emotional hijacking. Once you're aware of your triggers in things, I know these things trigger me. I know these things piss me off. I know that these are things that I perceive somebody else is trying to piss me off. Once we realize that's a trigger, we can take steps to diffuse our reaction. You got to spend time thinking about what situations or people trigger your emotional hijacks. How you felt during this situation and how you felt afterward. The next time you find yourself in one of your trigger situations where somebody triggers you, there are some steps that you can take to deal with that emotional hijack before it even escalates into something. One, take a pause and a deep breath to calm yourself. Now that might sound a little silly, and I said it to somebody today. I said, take a deep breath. Sounds silly. Take a deep breath in and breathe some of those things out. So take a deep breath to start with, and breathe in. Just say, breathe in the good, exhale the bad. It doesn't really work that way, but you can cognitively do that. The second thing is practice mindfulness. What is mindfulness? What is that thing? What is that we can do that makes us mindful? It's how to quiet your monkey mind And there's all kinds of strategies to do this. It's understanding what's happening. It's letting your mind play. Stepping into nature, maybe. Speaking to your thoughts. You speak to your thoughts about things. Catch and throw away. Take each one of these things captive, hold it, and give it back. Put it back in the river. And maybe meditation. Meditation's a good thing. And so these are some of the things that you can do. This is mindfulness, how you practice to be mindful. Name the emotions that you're experiencing so the thinking part of your brain is actually re-engaging. Don't just give in to the emotional response. Temper it by being mindful, taking a deep breath, experiencing your emotions. And if you can still feel the emotional hijack taking over, try and remove yourself from the situation so that you can regain control, this sense of calm. Okay, the second thing to look at, what did we say that first one was? How do you, the two activities to stop emotional hijacking? Recognize your triggers, increase your emotional intelligence. So we just talked about recognizing your triggers. Now, and we're almost out of time for tonight, but we may run over a little bit because we're live. So stick around, don't go anywhere if we do. Emotional intelligence is the second way. An emotionally intelligent person is someone who has a robust connection with the emotional part of their brain. They're well tuned to their thoughts and their feelings. I don't know, just mean knowing you have them. You're attuned to them. You have a connectivity with them. And a key strength of of an emotionally intelligent person is being able to de-escalate their own emotions. You take yourself down a notch or two. You de-escalate. That's the strength of emotional intelligence, being able to de-escalate your emotions so that they don't go onto overload, thereby preventing emotional hijacking. And fortunately, you can train your brain to become more emotionally intelligent through practices such as mindfulness, which involved all those things, include meditation even. Practicing mindfulness allows us to increase awareness of the present moment, being in tune to our environment around us, not letting unhelpful thoughts and emotions run around our head on repeat. And that's many times what we do. We put the emotional hijack on a loop and we let it just keep relooping, reloop, and we don't stop. And, let me just say a word about meditation. We've talked about that before. I'm shitty at it. I don't have time. I think I don't have time to meditate. And sometimes I'm so worn out, I meditate. I'm like, I'm meditating. And I'm off. I'm gone. I'm sleeping. So if you can concentrate on not concentrating, look at ways to meditate. There's ways to do this. Something that clears your mind. Now, there's going to be some instances in life where emotional hijacking is absolutely unavoidable. But there are steps that you can take. Train your brain. That's a step. To distinguish between situations that require a fight or a flight reaction and those that don't. Train your brain to tell the difference between what you need to fight about, what you need to run from. Second is have a better understanding of what triggers your emotional hijacking. Do you have an idea of what it is that triggers you to feel emotionally hijacked? Those are the things, when you get a handle on those, you understand what they are and where they come from, that's going to help you not be triggered by them or not be hijacked by them. And the third is increase your emotional intelligence through practices such as mindfulness. And so these are the key steps in really managing the function of the amygdala in our brain and preventing the occurrence of emotional hijacking. So ask yourself, have you been emotionally hijacked? Are they things where you let circumstances or people or things around you to trigger you and you get lost in the hijack. You get lost in the anxiety that you build up because you're afraid of what might happen, even though it hasn't happened yet. It's emotional hijacking. So, hey, Kyle, how you doing? I see Kyle. Is it Sellens? Good to see you in here. Scott Allen, good to see you. Some people. Steve Clark, good to see you, Steve. What else we got that I may have missed earlier? I think I've covered everybody. I like to say hi when you're here, when I'm going live. So, but you know I'm here, and I know I see you in the chat room. So there you go, folks. A lot to think about tonight. You can think about olives, 6,000-year-old olives. You say shaken, not stirred, and put an olive in. I know they've been eating olives for 6,000 years. So we got that. We got that going for us tonight. A fear. The fear of failure is an emotional hijack. And so look at all these things we talked about being emotionally hijacked. Can you avoid it? Yeah, you can. And you know what? That's all we got time for tonight. I hate to tell you. We can only run a little over right now because we're not stuck right now under the strictures of the network, which would have cut us off right here. We'll get this. We'll get it working live over on the network. So I love doing the live shows. Thank you, Teresa. Nice discussion, she says. Really appreciate your looking good up there, too. Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm actually down here. I'm in Louisiana. So I'm down on the Gulf Coast. And about as close to the Caribbean as you can get. Well, no, Florida is. Never mind. Forget that. Belay that. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. Mr. Ed, the talking horse. I see that thing. I almost posted a picture of Mr. Ed and Wilbur. Just yesterday, the day before, I saw a picture. I thought, oh, that's nostalgia I haven't seen for a while. Used to like Mr. Ed and that show when I was a kid. So yeah, all the Louisianaites kidnapped me and brought me down here. Doug and Field Guy, and God knows who else. Thanks, Doug Stack. Michelle Cannonfree, do things that put you in a calm, meditative state. Walking, music, art. And of course, who has time all the time for those finer things? We don't always have time for them. And maybe that's why we live in anxiety. Maybe that's why we live being repeatedly emotionally hijacked, because we don't give ourselves a chance to not be. So look to people. That's a good practice too. Look to people who you can trust and see how they do it. All right, folks, we're done. We got to get out of here. Thanks for being here. We will be back tomorrow night, 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain Time, 7 p.m. Left Coast Time. So if you are wanting to see this show again this week, Tuesday through Friday, we're going to be right here. Same, I don't want to say same bat time, same bat channel. Let's not even go there because that's so old and overused. Even though it's cliche and it's cool because it deals with Batman, we're not going to do that here. So, Rock and Rhonda, love you too. Scott Allen, you have a great night yourself. Matt Finn, you have a great night. Doug Stack, Teresa Dantone, Kyle Sellens. That's how you say your last name, so you're recognizing I'm actually saying it. Michelle Cannonfree, Doug Stack, and all the others. Matt Finn. Cruities, says Master Finn. Master Finn, bring her in. Furl the sails. All right. It was an important discussion, Michelle. I believe you. Very needed in these times. Absolutely. All right, folks. You take it easy. You have a good night. You all live long and prosper. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Now, you don't have to stay. You don't have to go home. But you can't stay here. Good night.